Hi, I'm Chris Bishop and welcome to this CNBC Africa special. Now we're at the Westcliff Hotel in Johannesburg for a conference on investment in Mauritius. And to look at the case for that investment, we're here with some of the sharpest minds in the business with Ken Punusami, Managing Director of the Board Investment. We've got Rainier van Rensburg, Financial Director at Africa. And then we've got Sridhar Nagaranjan, CEO of Standard Chartered Bank. Thank you very much for joining me, gentlemen. Starting with you, Ken, you're right in the middle of it. You've got to sell Mauritius to the world. What is the case looking like here in 2014, the tail end of 2014?
Well, in Mauritius, there is a lot of optimism. We have a very good case to sell to the world in terms of the fundamentals of what Mauritius has, what we have achieved, and what is the future strategy and growth prospect for Mauritius. So we're here to promote Mauritius as this regional platform for investment. And I must say that we've seen significant amount of foreign direct investment coming to the country. There is a lot of interest from investors that trust Mauritius. There's a lot of confidence. So I would say generally that for us in Mauritius, the growth prospects are very good. And the government has also the strategy of becoming a high-income economy, and we are all working towards making that a reality.
Just before we get into the debate, just give us an idea of the growth of that foreign investment that you're talking about.
Roughly, we have around $450 billion of investment annually. This has been quite steady over the years. There has been a few ups and downs, but I would say that on average, it has been around 4.5% of GDP. But what is more important is that basically in terms of the growth trajectory, we've this year have 3.5% of growth, and next year we hope that we will achieve much better. And the fundamentals are very good. We have managed to have very good fiscal discipline, monetary policy, inflation is under control, and therefore the prospects are very good for us.
So Rainier, I mean, as someone who's watching the market from perhaps a little bit more of a distance than the Board of Investment, what do you see?
I must say Mauritius is a very, let's say, business-friendly environment to operate within. They've got very good stringent controls on certain processes and how they want to achieve it, and you've got to follow it by the book, but they actually create a free environment where you can operate, which is much more flexible than I think in many other jurisdictions. We've had a very good experience for the last few years that we've set up office there. We're based more or less in the northern central parts of the island, got an office, got staff, and I must say it's been not a difficult process to actually implement and start a business from scratch there. So it's actually been very easy, and they're very supportive, especially the Board of Investments if you run into any issue that you need to deal with.
And Sridhar, I mean, what sort of a taste are you getting from a banking perspective? I mean, you were Standard Chartered, about what's going on with business and investment.
Chris, we follow a much more longer trend, and the way we see Mauritius is Mauritius will go through a phase of tremendous change, and it will become a very important part of connecting Asia and Africa through the South-South trade corridor. While the current phase of 5 to 6, the decade would be more in terms of, as Ken said, the regional platform, which will be more on corporate setting up regional offices and things like that, which is like a financial center. As a bank which is majorly into trade, we see that the next decade would be, it'll move into a proper logistic hub where the Mauritius port, like how the Singapore port or the Malta port, would start connecting both physical trade. So that's what we see, that it's in a state of growth where first it will go into a regional platform for financial services, for corporate offices and all that, connecting Pan-Africa. Then it will go towards capturing the physical trade in the South-South trade corridor, which already is around $400 billion. If you add Brazil and the South America, it's close to around $500 billion of trade.
So it all sounds very encouraging, but Ken, you know, people are never satisfied. Some of the business people I've talked to, they say, fine, Mauritius has done a lot to attract business, but it could be doing more. What do you think that Mauritius could be doing more?
Certainly there is room for improvement. You know, in terms of the government has invested massively in terms of the infrastructure, extension of the airport, the investment in the port, road infrastructure and telecommunications. So the whole idea is, how do we build connectivity? How do we make sure that people move freely to access Mauritius, how trade can happen, how the financial flows. And I think over the years we've managed to make progress, and we will continue to make progress. We're going to be more innovative, new products that we are going to put on the market. And there's this process of continuous improvement that makes it the force, the strength of Mauritius moving forward. I would also say that there is real synergy between government and private sector. So yes, there are challenges, but these challenges are being tackled. So the government has the foresight, so whoever is there, they are going to continue in terms of the process of making sure that we graduate. And in all the different sectors, the strategies, how do we build value? How do we make sure that in every single sector, our people are able to earn more living, so more salary, there's greater productivity, there's greater efficiency. So a whole range of programs have been made. And I think we are really at the crossroad, because never before has this region seen tremendous amount of trade flows and capital coming. And we are in interesting times where Asia, Middle East and Africa are booming. So therefore Mauritius is at a very strategic point. And I think this is where we are going to capitalize and harness all the opportunities that are available for us.
I mean, changes, Renette, is it moving fast enough for you?
Yeah, I think it is. I think what I've seen just in the last 2-3 years, the amount of DTAs that have been signed between Mauritius and some of the African countries where we invest from Mauritius has actually increased quite a bit. I think it's always challenging for a country that has got let's say a more lower tax rate than many other jurisdictions to actually get more DTAs signed that are more favorable for people. But I think Mauritius has done quite well in balancing what the expectations are of shareholders, but at the same time achieving a commercial viable transaction between the various countries. So I think it's moved quite along. There's some DTAs that are taking a while specifically, but I don't think it's actually it's on Mauritius' fault. I think it's more on the African countries. They've got bigger challenges than to worry about DTAs, because they've got existing other jurisdictions which they feel they're channeling it through there. So I think if you ask me if I had to choose a number, I think it's better than what it used to be. So I'd probably say it's somewhere between a 6 and an 8, running on that.
And what about from a banking perspective?
Yeah, I do agree with Rena. I think the pace of change and the pace of progress and facilitation within Mauritius has increased tremendously in the last 2 years. Since the government came up with an Africa strategy first in 2012 budget, in 2013 they came up with an expanded Africa strategy. So what happened, that aligned the forces, and today you can really see that when someone comes from, let's say, South Africa for facilitating Pan-African business, there is a general alignment both in the private and the public sectors that there is a need for us to make it work. A good example would be regional headquarters guidelines. You know, the budget said that, the Financial Services Commission came with the guideline, they consulted with us, we said what we need to be, and that guideline has helped quite a lot of companies which has come to set up regional headquarters. And from a banking perspective, for example, we rolled out the Regional Treasury Center product, which runs on that because it's about liquidity management. So that's a good alignment. You know, you come with the regional headquarters product, the concessions, and then the bank can roll it out. So for us, but I think it's a process which should continue because there's so much to be done. If you really take an access point like Singapore, I think we've just started in that point, and so we will continue in that, and it's just the starting, and the sophistication of how we provide access to Pan-Africa will only increase, is my view.
I'd like to add something there just on the banking. You know, we've got jurisdictions in Africa that we deal with, and we're dealing with, fortunately, it's Standard Bank, one of your competitors. But just to illustrate exactly what he was saying is that we've got the bank accounts also in Mauritius, and we can access it off one platform and move the funds across, which actually makes it very business friendly, and it makes you operate quicker. You've got a better handle on your treasury, which I think is exactly what he's alluding to. So I definitely think it's a much more easier business platform to operate from than in some of the other African countries.
Well, more food for thought, Ken. And I was interviewing the billionaire the other day, Nicky Oppenheimer, and he said one of the greatest challenges facing this continent is corruption. And I was just reading a report from Transparency International saying that Mauritius has gone up another couple of places in the world rankings, an extra 2 points over the halfway mark, as it were, between 0 and 100. The question I have for you is that everyone talks about stamping out corruption, doing something about it, but how does a country actually do it physically?
It's a very good question, and I think the way to tackle corruption is that you need to have greater transparency, and you need to have rules and regulations which are very clear. We have done quite a bit in terms of the business facilitation that came in 2006. Actually triggered a whole range of reforms where we established certain guidelines in key sectors. For example, if someone wants to go and build a warehouse, there is a building and land use permit that he needs. So by making these rule-based, so you need to do A, B, C, D, then you get the permit, it becomes easier. It's not a discretion. There's no discretion in the law that allows somebody else to say, okay, it's my discretion, I'll give that permit. So if you start building that kind of rules within the system, then you eliminate corruption. And this is what we have been doing, and we've been quite successful. And you will see that people are more confident, investors like the system, and they trust the way that we operate. I must say that there are room for improvement, and these are being done slowly. And the only way to do it is by establishing these guidelines and making sure that these are communicated to the business community, to the world, so that when they come to the country, they know exactly what they have to do, and they don't need to just do any act of corruption.
Well, I worked in Botswana for a year, where you've got to fill in a form for everything. It's got very low corruption, as you know, and I swear that no one had any time to try to break the system because there was so much involved. And maybe you've got a point there. Someone said to me on this very channel that they worked in Mauritius for 10, 15 years, and they said they'd never ever been asked for a bribe. Do you back that up?
I would concur with that, 100%, definitely. Never. I think I haven't been involved in any process where I want to offer or anything, because we're a value-driven company. But I can tell you, I think if you were to do something like that, I think you would be taken to task as well at that stage. So they're not going to accept it. I think they're going to report you, and you're going to go through a process, which I think is very vigilant, which is great. So I think, to me, it's a bottom-up and a top-down approach. The leaders must actually be held accountable, and they must be shown examples where the people go out. And from bottom up, they must educate the children. The children must actually see what values are about, and actually they must see the examples of their leaders, how they've been taken to task if they walk outside the pathway that they're supposed to.
Now, Shrida, I have to ask you, in the banking world of Mauritius, any hint? Is it resignation material? Any hint of corruption?
See, from our perspective, of course, I'll echo Ken's sentiment. I think the transparency is the fundamental thing which we see. For example, giving a banking example, if you see the Monetary Policy Committee of Mauritius, it has eminent luminaries. It meets every quarterly to set up the benchmark rate. Actually, the central bank publishes the minutes of that meeting. I mean, it's a lot of difficulty, because that committee is not easy. You don't necessarily have to agree. So it actually publishes the minutes of the meeting, who said what, and why the decision. I think that's a lot to take even from the central bank to do that. The second, possibly, I would say with that itself, some of the things which I've noticed is there's this whole concept of P&Q. The opposition can ask a public note question. And I've noticed that the whole machinery works through the night to prepare the information to give it to the minister or the prime minister to answer. So that's a lot of seriousness taken. If a question is asked, and that question could be on anything, so that creates a transparent. And also, when a public infrastructure, like recently I saw there is a parking lot, it's clear when the lot is, now it's going to be built, there is a beautiful board. The board has the picture of what it should be. The whole details of who's the contractor, there are 5, who's the architect. So everyone knows what's happening, and if you're not comfortable, then you raise a question, and there is a clear expectation that within a very specific timeline, it cannot be woolly answers, it has to be specific. I think that's the best way to create a counterbalance, and we see that.
If I can just add on that, I think the institutions play a big role. You need to have institutions that can act upon. And you need to be able to show that transparency, like Shrida is mentioning. For example, in allocating contracts, you have an appeal review mechanism where everything is done publicly. So the bidders, the tenderers are here, they know exactly what has been tendered, and there's a dispute. If there are any issues with a contest, with respect to a bid, so it is made clear, and they can voice it out through this mechanism. So I think that also helps in reducing the level of corruption.
One thing that strikes me about Mauritius, having spent time there recently, is that the range of investments. I mean, some of the schemes people are coming up with, solar, putting windmills at sea, harvesting minerals from the sea. It seems to me there's quite a wide variety of people with ideas and money behind it. Well, why do you think that is at the moment, aside from the business fundamentals you've already talked about?
I think Mauritius, we've always been able to remain successful and to grab the opportunities by diversification. We started as a monocrop economy, we went into industrialization with textiles, then tourism, then all range of services sectors. So we have, through this development phase, we've managed to create a niche for ourselves. And it is that kind of reinvention, that kind of inbuilt entrepreneurship within the system that makes it really successful for Mauritius. So all along, I would say that we have managed to build resilience within the economy because of this diversification. We managed to create that growth prospect because of diversification. Otherwise, you know, we would not have been as successful. So within that same mindset, within that same principle, there are new sectors that we are always developing, and the ocean economy is a good example where we have 7 clusters. And the idea is how do we harness opportunities within each of them. There's a whole range of activities that we want to do, and therefore I think it's quite natural. And the good thing is that the government also shows the way. There's a commitment to really drive these projects. If we take the case of the Freeport, the ICT, the education sector, government puts the money, they have the willingness, the drive to move with it, and the private sector also is aligned to participate fully in these initiatives. And certainly the job of the Board of Investment is how do we make sure that within that there is also a component of foreign direct investment, because we need to have capital, we need to have technology, we need to have know-how. And that's how we bring in those competencies, those skills that we need to make sure that productivity increases, that there's this transfer of skills, which is very important for a small country like Mauritius, so that we prosper.
So one particular point I want to start with you, Ken, and speak to the other 2 gentlemen about, is that an idea I had floated was competing with India for this large medical tourism market, for want of a better word. People come in for their operations and then recuperating on the beach instead of in a hotel room somewhere. So how practical that is? Do you think Mauritius has got the capacity and the doctors?
I think we've managed to attract investment. So we have private clinics that have committed a huge amount of investment. And it's a question of cost arbitrage. It is how do you make sure that someone who is sitting in the UK, in Europe, or even some other places where it is expensive, he can get the same treatment, the same standard of treatment, but at a lower cost. And I think that's where the competitive advantage of Mauritius lies, is we've managed to be able to provide a package to those people that are coming as a tourist, that you can have your treatment in Mauritius, but at a lower cost. And that makes the difference.
What do you think? Have you looked into this area of investment?
We probably won't get involved in something like that. We set up purely out of retail. We're a retail-focused property fund. But what I can say is I was involved in my previous life in the healthcare industry quite extensively, and there's definitely opportunity for that. I think Mauritius is very well poised. It's got lots of flights from Europe. Air Mauritius is a very good airline. I use it quite frequently. So I think they definitely can do it. I think the one thing is important is you mustn't have a drop in the quality. I think that's important. I think in terms of their tourism, probably of the best that you'll find anywhere across the world. The weather is amazing, and I think it's conducive to good relaxation and recuperating. So I think it can definitely work. It's all in the numbers, I think. That's what it's all about.
I mean, Sridhar, are there people banging on your door asking for investment for this kind of a business, medical tourism?
This business actually is already taken off in Mauritius because the type of quality of infrastructure which has been created, two large tertiary hospital businesses from India has come and joined hands with this, and they brought their own facilities, doctors and all. So we have built the capacity. The point which I wanted to add to what Ken said is it's not necessarily from Europe alone. If you really see, the medical tourism for Africa has been going to South Africa. Today South Africa is not able to handle it, and South Africa obviously has become a little bit more expensive. So essentially we are also, the doctors are saying that there is also African tourists, not tourists, African patients are now coming to Mauritius because it's more a capacity issue within Pretoria or Joburg. So it is creating, and it's connected with other things. For example, the knowledge hub, when eventually students complete. So it's a part of a larger thing and not alone. Medical tourism is not a standalone aspect of Mauritius's growth story.
Sure, Ken. I mean, the people I've talked to about this idea, they say you've got the doctors, you've got the hospitals, you've got the infrastructure, but the only thing that's going to like to hold you back is the distance. And do you have enough airlines and enough flights to make this business work? What do you think?
Well, I think there has been tremendous improvement in terms of the connectivity in Mauritius. We have now more connectivities than 5 years ago. So I think there is also plans to increase the number of flights. And as Sridhar said, we have to tap into the regional market also. And that is, even from South Africa, from Madagascar, from Comoros, from other parts in Eastern and Southern Africa. So there is also a tremendous opportunity in there.
So this is one of just many different aspects of the economy. And really, I mean, if you could improve something in the economy of Mauritius regarding investment, what would it be?
I think if Mauritius wants to go one step further than some of the other countries and they see themselves as part of Africa, I think they must maintain the current heading, because I think they are probably the gateway for many Indian companies. I know some of the other offshore jurisdictions actually choose Mauritius to go into Africa. South Africa has been fighting for long to try and get into that, and that's why there's some debates going on currently in terms of the treaty that exists between South Africa and Mauritius. So I think they must carry on with their current heading. And I think the other thing they must do is they must try and push for some of these DTAs that actually haven't come into place yet, which actually makes it less advantageous compared to some of the other countries that exist, which have been in existence for many years. Like in Europe, you've got treaties with Ireland and some of the countries, Dubai and so forth, so with some of these African countries. So I think that's where they should focus on, because the rest of the stuff and the points and the goals that they've put into place, they're achieving it. It's working. There's nothing more they need to do on that side. It's more now, I think, at a multilateral between country to country where they actually have to increase. But it's a two-way street, that. So that's the challenge. I think Mauritius is very keen. It's a question of if the other countries are keen to have that on their list.
And Ken, what would you say, I mean, in terms of improvement looking ahead?
Well, just to respond to this point, on the DTA, obviously there is a whole strategy of getting into more of these agreements, and also the investment promotion and protection agreements. But I think what is more important is what are the fundamentals, in terms of the rule of law, democracy, the stability, the infrastructure. These also matter a lot when investors choose a country. So the DTAs perhaps have served Mauritius, but I think today we have to go to that next level, is how do we consolidate and make sure that we build within that a situation where Mauritius becomes more competitive. And that's what we are trying to do, is by making sure that there is investment in the infrastructure, that making sure that our people get the capacity, the training required to make sure that whenever there are investors that are coming, they meet the expectations. And I would say the challenges also is we also have our own issues in terms of youth unemployment, which obviously the government needs to tackle, and it is going to tackle it. So making sure that there is training, there's capacity building, and that these people are offered decent jobs.
I mean, Sridhar, you've got to agree that's one of the worrying stories of not just the world, but this entire continent as well. How many educated people there are sitting around with no jobs or no hope in the future. How do you think Mauritius can set an example in getting people into giving them a stake in society?
To be fair, Mauritius is surely a much inclusive society. It's a welfare society. Of course, one of the things which even came today is, of course, Mauritius also needs to come to a level where the students who come out of the universities are much more ready for the private sector, and we have discussed this internally. I think it's an Africa problem. In Mauritius, it's not much of a problem, but we are also working extensively to bring some sort of finishing school type of a thing, because we are talking about ocean economy, we are talking about new sectors coming into play. So how do we prepare this youth who are coming out of universities for these new sectors? I think that's clearly a priority for the government, and it's a priority for private sector. There is a priority for the banking sector also, how to prepare these students to come straight away and start working in the financial services sector. I think we'll take a pretty large step on that very soon.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen, for your insights. I thank you, Ken Punasamy, Managing Director, Board of Investment, Rania van Rensburg, Financial Director at Africa, and Sridhar Nagaranjan, Chief Executive Officer of Standard Chartered Bank. Thank you very much. That concludes the first half of this program, but stay with us. In the second half, we'll be looking at more stories from Mauritius. We'll be looking at tax, looking at the regulatory environment, and also the stock exchange. Do stay with us. Welcome back to the Westcliff Hotel in Johannesburg, where we're holding this special debate on investment in Mauritius. Now, this half of the program, we hope to look at a lot of matters, everything from regulation to tax. So we have some experts here with me. I have Fred Swaneker, the co-founder of the African Leadership Foundation. He's a man who chose to set up in Mauritius and can tell us the inside story. I have also Sunil Benimadu, the Chief Executive Officer of the Mauritius Stock Exchange, or Stock Exchange of Mauritius. Then I have Ben Lim, the Chief Executive Officer of the Intercontinental Trust. To start with you, Fred, I mean, you're an entrepreneur who chose Mauritius to set up your company. You're hail from Ghana. Why did you do that? Why did you choose Mauritius?
Well, I was attracted to Mauritius for a few things. One is I'm setting up a chain of universities that will have a footprint across the continent. But in looking at my headquarters, I thought I needed a place that had a friendly environment for investors. And Mauritius has a very efficient board of investment that you can deal with. That's a one-stop shop. They'll help you register a company quickly and help you, get work permits for your staff, and really facilitate your entry into the country. So I thought that was a plus that Mauritius has. The second thing I found attractive about Mauritius is the fact that it's got excellent infrastructure. So when you're starting a business, you want to focus on the actual business model that you have and not worry about water that you have to provide for yourself, and electricity and internet access and all these things that you can just take for granted in a country like Mauritius. So I found that was also attractive. The third thing I found attractive was the fact that Mauritius has liberalized travel visas for I think 50 out of the 54 countries in Africa. So if I want to bring my staff even for a training conference from all across Africa, it's easy for me to do that. And the work permits and so forth, which for example, South Africa is becoming increasingly difficult to get permits for people to work here. And finally, you've got a government that has a very strategic approach to growing its economy. They've stated, for example, that they want education to be one of its pillars of economic growth, and therefore there's a friendly regulatory environment that's attracting international universities to come and set up there. So, and they've obviously identified other sectors that are priority sectors for growth. So, that's the kind of country you want to go into. You want to go into a country where the government actually understands that the private sector is the engine of growth, and they'll support you. So that's why I went to Mauritius. Okay,
Fred, so moving to you, Sunil, on behalf of the stock exchange. What sort of reaction are you getting from companies wanting to put capital into Mauritius through your stock exchange at this particular time?
Before I answer your question, I think it's important to set the background to the changes that have characterized the exchange ecosystem in Mauritius during the last 4 years. Before 2009, 2010, the stock exchange of Mauritius was essentially a domestic equity-centric exchange catering for local companies and local investors. But since 2009, we've been busy aligning our strategy with a national agenda of positioning Mauritius as an attractive gateway, but attractive financial hub for investments into different emerging regions of the world, including Africa. So to do that, we've had to modernize our listing framework, but also come with a very important flexible framework, operational framework for the exchange industry. And to do that, we created our multi-currency listing, trading and settlement platform. We came up with a listing framework that would allow us today in Mauritius to list a very wide variety of structures, of asset classes, and we've also tried to leverage off the successful global business sector in Mauritius, which harbors billions of dollars of investable money. So today we are allowing companies from all around the world, including Africa, but also international companies, to leverage off this multi-currency platform to raise capital internationally, but also from Mauritius, trade and settle in different currencies. So we're receiving some buy-in from international companies for these new innovative approaches of the Mauritian exchange. And we've listed 60 new securities over the last 4 years. We've helped these companies, these newly listed companies, to raise $2.4 billion. And I think the future will see more and more international companies coming to the stock exchange of Mauritius, structured in Mauritius, investing in Africa, investing in different parts of the world.
Ben, how are these changes being received by the financial world out there?
Well, the financial world out there is taking advantage of those changes. In fact, we are promoting the stock exchange of Mauritius as a way of capital raising, okay, for promoters, investors worldwide. Within our company, we set up a listing team. Okay, we've listed quite a few entities. We have quite a few more in the pipeline, which is coming up in Q1 2015. We are very confident that the value proposition from the stock exchange of Mauritius is going to be very interesting for a large number of investors.
I mean, how would you compare it? I mean, obviously you've got a lot of experience around the world. What potential has it got? Where would you compare it to around the world, Mauritius?
Well, I don't think it's comparable. Mauritius is part of Africa. And if you look at the African exchanges, how many African exchanges are members of the World Federation of Exchanges? There's only a handful. Okay? And how many of them offer a multi-currency listing? Only one, meaning Mauritius. In Mauritius, you can list in dollar, euro, sterling, South African rand, and Mauritius currency. Okay, you can pick and choose. You could also dual list your stock, your securities in a number of other exchanges, including on JSE or on AIM in London.
And just one thing, Fred, as an entrepreneur who's actually putting your money in there, one thing that entrepreneurs do talk about in Mauritius is the tax regime there. It seems to be quite favorable. As an entrepreneur, how did you find it?
Well, obviously, I mean, I like the fact that there's a flat rate, 15%, which is lower than many other countries in Africa. So that obviously makes it attractive as a base, especially when you're doing business across the continent. And it's got a very favorable, double tax treaties with taxation treaties with many countries on the continent as well. So as I thought about a base for a Pan-African operation, the tax environment in Mauritius is very attractive.
And speaking about the double tax treaties, I mean, I was reading that there's talks between the government of India, which is a great economic partner with Mauritius, and Mauritius about the future of this tax treaty. What is likely to happen there, you think?
Well, perhaps just to go back a bit, well, not a bit, back to 1983. This was when the treaty was signed. In fact, India signed a dozen of similar treaties with other countries. So Mauritius didn't get a favor from India at that time. But in 1992, when India opened up, we introduced a financial system within our economy that promoted investments through Mauritius into India, taking advantage of that treaty signed in 1983. And if you look at the statistics, from 1992 to date, Mauritius accounted for 47% of all FDI into India. Okay, that's a huge sum. This includes all the hot money through the hedge funds on the capital markets. It's only FDI, 47%. Okay, now going back to the negotiations between the two governments, this has been going on for a long time. The Prime Minister of India, Mr. Modi, just again reiterated that India will not do anything that will harm the interests of Mauritius during the negotiation of the treaty. So the discussion are ongoing, but of course one important element is forthcoming introduction of GAR in India, the General Anti-Avoidance Rules. Okay, we need to make sure that whatever we agree during discussions are not superseded by domestic law. So it's very difficult to find I would say, a solution, because the people who come and negotiate cannot give undertakings.
What changes do you think there could be out of these talks with India?
Well, if you look at treaties that have been signed recently or renegotiated recently by India, you would pick the Singapore Treaty. The Singapore Treaty has a limitation of benefits, okay, with regard to who can take advantage of that treaty. There are a number of conditions there, including a minimum expenditure in the last 2 years, and so on. So those, I would say, those factors could be brought into the negotiation between the two governments.
Just moving on, Sunil, just talking more broadly about regulations. What do you think, as regarding investment and the financial world, what do you think regulatory changes there might be in the future, you think?
I think if you look at the way the world is moving currently, especially post-2008 crisis, you see that there is a lot of focus on the need to bring OTC trading to the exchange platform, especially in the derivative space. So I think because what the regulators have seen post-2008 is none of the contracts that were traded on the exchanges in the derivatives market failed during the 2008 crisis, where there was a lot of volatility, a lot of pressure, but the failures were on the OTC, in the OTC space. And that's where now the changes that we're seeing is to encourage more transparency, and to do that, I think exchanges are the ideal platforms. So that's one thing that I see going forward that has already started, but that is going to accelerate in the future. I also see a lot of pressure on the exchange industry. We've seen that because there is consolidation. There is a lot of fight for market shares all around the world. And we, within Africa, we have to bear that in mind as regulators, but also as exchange operators. There are some what I would call very important strategic shifts that are characterizing this space. And as operators of exchanges operating in an environment which I would say is new, we have to bear that in mind. So I would say that we would see a lot of discussions in terms of regulatory cooperation, in terms of consolidation, in terms of need to cooperate, create strategic links among exchanges, the use of technology to cross-link markets so as to increase the global order flows that go through the different markets. And I would say that at the level of the Stock Exchange of Mauritius, given the fact that we are an active member of the World Federation of Exchanges, we are engaging with all these exchanges to see how we can leverage off these changes, although we are a very small market, a very small country. But I think we can certainly learn from what's going on, and that's what we want to do.
And what about competition in these difficult times from the rest of the continent? I mean, the JSE, the NSE in Lagos. How much competition is there with Mauritius?
I think, competition for us at the level of the stock exchange of Mauritius is not new. Mauritius is an extremely open economy. Investors in Mauritius today can sit at home in Mauritius and invest all around the world because Mauritius is an open economy. There's no exchange control. As an investor, nobody tells you where to invest. So the competition for us has been ongoing for the past 20 years that we've been in existence. So new competition, of course, will unfold as we move forward. And I think as any business, it's important for us to bear that in mind, strategize how we're going to act in face of competition, and try to make sure that we have the kind of ecosystem, the kind of framework, the kind of operational setup that would make us relevant to our stakeholders. And these two stakeholders are the investors and the potential issuers. And that's what we've been busy trying to do over the last 10 years, and we're going to do that more going into the future.
Well, Fred, as one of the many Africans who've put your money where your mouth is in Mauritius, you've invested there. It seems a free environment. You can move your money in and out. Is there anything any changes you'd like to see as an entrepreneur, maybe to make your life easier? I don't know.
Well, I think that the country has a population of 1.3 million. It'd be nice to see a bit more people living on the island. Because I'm thinking about moving there in a few months to be based there. It'd be nice to have a larger population so that you can also have, for example, in my situation, the local market is not going to be very big for what we're doing, so we're going to have to attract people from the rest of Africa. But other than that, I think it's a great place to do business.
And Ben, I mean, what do you think from a financial markets point of view? Do you think what regulatory changes you think would be beneficial to attracting more people and more money into Mauritius?
Well, I believe we are already doing what needs to be done. Okay, of course, there's more to do. Okay, right now investors can come in, can invest, can set up business, can obtain a work permit, residence permit within 3 days. So whether it's financial world or not, okay, they can come and live in Mauritius. Africans out of the 48 out of the 54 countries can come visa-free and come to Mauritius and get a visa on arrival. So it's already very open, okay? So I don't see much that can be done, okay, to attract more.
And one thing I've got to ask you is the actual settlement of the rich people. Was it the people who come and buy parts of Mauritius, foreigners?
Yes.
And bring their money. I mean, I'm told there's something like 2,000 to 3,000 people from all over the world living in Mauritius. How has that scheme worked out? Has it really been a kickstart to the economy?
Well, absolutely. We started that scheme a few years ago. There are a number of schemes in Mauritius. Integrated Resort Scheme, IRS, the bigger resorts with 5-star hotel facilities like golf courses and hotel attached to them. Then you have a smaller one, real estate schemes. And then you have the invest hotel schemes. And then for anyone who live and work in Mauritius, they can buy one apartment. Okay? And all those benefits are available to non-citizens. Okay? I mean, surely it's contributed to bring more people to Mauritius, more people at our shopping centers, okay? More people paying taxes as well in Mauritius. But I agree. We can attract many more, okay? And it's important to look at who are interested to come to Mauritius. If you look at the list of citizens, nationals of which country are in Mauritius, first of the list you have Indians, French, and then South Africans, okay? And I do believe that, citizens from those countries are interested to come to Mauritius, and if we concentrate our efforts in those countries, we'll get many more coming.
How do you see that, Sunil?
No, I think I tend to agree that Mauritius has today 1.3 million, and there is scope to increase that number so as to make the local economy more dynamic, so as to bring more value-add services to the country. So I think our target has to be attract as many professionals as we can from the surrounding regions, people like yourself, but people from South Africa, Europe, India, China, and so on. Grow the internal economy, but make sure that we have quality and not quantity that drives that process. And then leverage of the presence of these professionals to bring higher value add services in Mauritius, grow the internal strength of the economy, bring new services to the financial services sector, attract new institutions to do business. And I think if, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I think we need to look at what Singapore did. Singapore, is 1/3 the size of Mauritius. 30 years ago, I think it had more or less the same population. Today it has 5 million or more. I'm not saying that we would go from 1.2, 1.3 to 5 million. I think it has to be done in a phased manner. But it's very clear to my mind that the integration of Mauritius to the rest of the world will be done not only through technology, not only through financial services, but also by bringing quality people to Mauritius to help us take the economy to the next stage of its growth.
But that's one thing I have to ask you as well, Fred, as an outsider. I mean, people I know who do business there, they say, yes, it is relatively easy to do business, but it is a small, tight-knit community. And as an outsider, sometimes it can be difficult to break in. I mean, what's your experience?
Well, so far, I've found quite a welcoming environment. Time remains to be seen as I move there and try to break into the different communities, whether there's the expat community that's there or the local Mauritian business community. But I think in my case as well, if everything what we do, we could end up bringing 1,000 of our own professionals from all around the world to come and live there. So, we could create our own little community that will allow us to. And so, as I say, I'm taking a wait-and-see approach.
But picking up on what Sunil said, I mean, Ben, Mauritius is a remarkable economic story. I mean, 40 years ago, it was reliant on the colonial trade in sugar, etc., and it's completely transformed in a way in which other countries in Africa would be glad to do so. What do you think the world can learn from Mauritius's experience over the last 40 years?
Well, I believe one thing Mauritius doesn't have is natural resources. And I think that's it. That's the reason why we have to, get our growth, our economic growth, get revenue from somewhere else, okay? And people from Mauritius are always very innovative, okay? We try to reinvent ourselves. Of course, we try to also look at other jurisdictions like Singapore and so on. But Mauritius remains Mauritius. Mauritius was a gateway to India, gateway to China, now it's a gateway to Africa. So what do we do? What do we do to improve the position of Mauritius, to make sure that Mauritius is the international financial center for Africa? Okay, we are emerging as an IFC. We're not yet an IFC. We're not yet Hong Kong. We're not yet Singapore. We're not yet Dubai. But we are emerging to be the IFC for Africa.
Well, I think as one of your colleagues said to me once from the Bank of Mauritius, he said the only difference between us and Singapore, they had oil, we had sugar, and this is where we are. But, I mean, overall, what's your general feeling in the economy, Sunil? I mean, just looking ahead to the future now, where do you think Mauritius should be aiming?
I think from an economic standpoint, it's very clear that the past 20 years have been remarkable, as you rightly pointed out. I mean, we've transformed a small sugar state into a thriving African economy. We've changed a lot of things that has helped to position Mauritius as an important business place, as a stepping stone into different regions of the world. But it's very clear going forward that we have a lot of challenges. I think the main challenge for us is how do we move from a middle-income country to a high-income country, and what are the structural changes that need to be implemented to enable us to achieve that very difficult leap towards a high-income economy, especially within an environment, an international environment, which is very difficult. So that's where I think our focus should be going forward. what does it take for a successful economy to graduate to the next level, which is become a high-income economy. So this will entail diversification of services, diversification of markets, growth of our internal market. This is where I join you in saying that, you know, a 1.3 million, how viable is a 1.3 million country if you want to achieve and become a high-income country? How do we get the right kind of people to come to the country? How do we move up the value chain of services? I think these are going to be the critical questions that we would be asking ourselves. We've already started asking ourselves, and finding the right answers to these questions would certainly help us in achieving this very important objective.
Fred, you're in the training and education business. I mean, what are you picking up from Mauritius about the level of skills and education and training that you see there? I mean, do you think it's sufficient to build this leap, shall we say, into a higher income country?
I think that, you know, no nation can invest enough in education. So they definitely need to keep doing more. But compared to other countries in Africa, I mean, Mauritius has one of the highest rates of tertiary enrollment on the continent, if not the highest. And you know, now the government has a strategy of 1 graduate per family, you know, which I think is a wonderful vision to have. So I think that the government has the right priority you know, in terms of emphasizing education. And from my experience in dealing with, you know, Mauritian professionals, whether it's tax advisors or accountants or lawyers, you know, I found them to be world class. So I think that there's a good foundation which can be built on. You know, at the end of the day, if you don't have natural resources, the only thing you have, the only assets you have are your people. And they've invested in their people to get them to this point, and they need to keep investing to get them to the next level.
I mean, Ben, in your business, when you're looking for young, well-trained people in Mauritius, are there enough skills around to drive?
Good question. I run a trust company in Mauritius, and I can tell you, when I compare my model to trust companies overseas, I employ 99.9% local. Okay, all my staff are local. Very few expats, and I do see very few expats across the industry, in the financial services world. Of course, you know, the higher the hierarchy from the bank's point of view and so on, you will have the expats. Okay, but you find Mauritius to be quite peculiar because there's a lot of locals. And if you compare Mauritius to Jersey, Guernsey, Isle of Man, you'll see the ratio of expat to local is very high over there. In Mauritius is very low. So the quality and the quantity is there in Mauritius.
Is this true for the Mauritius Stock Exchange?
Yes. I think if you look at the Stock Exchange of Mauritius, I mean 100% of the people are local. And we've got quality people. And I think coming back to the previous question you asked me, what are one of the challenges that we're facing? I think creating jobs, because we have a highly qualified young generation with university degrees, with postgraduate degrees, and job creation. You know, we are facing jobless growth. You know, not enough jobs are being created to absorb the young generation that is coming from universities outside of Mauritius. So I think that's going to be one of the challenges, and to be able to absorb that, we need to grow from the current 3% to 5%. That should be our target going forward, and this is where, you know, all the questions that I just mentioned before, we would need to find the right answers to these questions so as to enable us, you know, to create growth with jobs.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen, for your insights. Thank you very much, Fred Swaneker, co-founder of African Leadership Network. Thank you, Sunil Benimadu, the Chief Executive Officer of the Stock Exchange of Mauritius, and Ben Lim, Chief Executive Officer of the Intercontinental Trust. Thank you very much indeed for all your insights. Well, that's all we've got time for, I'm afraid, at this gathering on investment in Mauritius. From me, Chris Bishop at the Westcliff Hotel in Johannesburg, it's goodbye.